Action. Yo, what's up, everyone? This is Antonio Knox, and this is the Gradient Radio. We have a very, very special guest today. Her name is Lauren White, and she is an incredible person, but also an incredible creative.
Thank you so much. Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this. I think everything that you do is incredible. So the fact that I am here is such an honor.
Thank you.
Such an honor. As you said, my name is Lauren White. I am from the Richmond area, and I am a strategist, purpose advocate, bit of a spiritual gangster. Those are my three claims to fame.
It's incredible.
But I'm really excited to be here to kind of delve into conversation, and hopefully it inspires somebody.
Where that's a goal, really, to really inspire the people who will look at it or listen to it. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for being a part of this. You could have been anywhere else, but you decided to be here. I was trying to think of that Jay-Z quote at the end of the song, or at the beginning of the song. Okay. So you told a little bit about yourself. Could you dive a little bit more deeper into who you are as a creative?
Yes. So I feel like I have always been a creative since a child. Always was really into different types of art. As a kid, I wanted to do some of everything. At one point, I wanted to be a designer. At one point, I wanted to be an actor. Any type. I just knew I was going to be on the Disney Channel at 10. Just all types of art I've been into. At one point, I wanted to do music. So I've always been into different types of art, different types of expression. I found my niche when it came to graphic design. So I found out about graphic design, or what graphic design was, in high school. It was kind of before everybody was a graphic designer.
Facts.
I took a class and I was like, oh man, this is really cool. This is something I vibe with. But I always have been a very both and person. As much as I've been right brain, I also am very left brain. If there was something in the middle, I feel like I would be that.
Yeah.
So I always really also had a knack for marketing, for business, for how like one thing connects to another. So I was taking marketing classes as a kid as well. And I was like, there has to be some sort of career that meshes the two. Like, I can't be the only one that loves marketing and design like just as much as the other. There has to be something that meshes the two. And so I remember being in, I want to say it was our sports marketing class, but we were learning about all different types of like marketing and what I now know as branding. So we were looking at like the McDonald's logo and all of these different things. And I was like, who is the person that makes that? Like, who's the person that makes the logo or decides the colors or decides like that this thing is going to represent like all of this, right? So I remember Googling and I was like, what is the intersection of design and marketing? And I found out what branding was. And I was like, ooh, this is what I want to do. Like, this is the thing. And what's so funny is even before I discovered it, I remember I had gotten into our school's like cosmetology program because I was going to do, again, I was into like every type of creativity. So I was going to like really like do something in the beauty industry. And I remember like right before my senior year being like, ooh, no, like somebody else can have this spot. I need to give this spot to somebody else because there's something else I want to do and this is not it.
Yeah.
And so I remember switching to like marketing, switching to design, and that's like when I found my thing. And that was the thing that I ended up sticking with. And so I used those skills to design. I'm a PK, so all of the...
Tell people what that means.
I'm a preacher's kid. I'm a preacher's kid, a very spoiled one at that. So anything I wanted to do, I was able to do if I felt like we needed to do some sort of event. or if we had a conference, like whatever it was, that was my practice ground. So I would design the promos for it. I would develop the branding for it. I would brand sermon series. I would do different iterations of branding for our church. I would design events, and all of that kind of led me to like finding my sweet spot. So that's kind of like my fresh beginning.
That's incredible. It seems like you've had a journey to get to where you are currently right now, and there are so many people out there who are trying to figure out like what they want to do with their lives, and they feel as if they need to know what they want to do right now and then, and oftentimes it takes a journey and many things to getting to exactly where you want to get to, and allowing yourself to go down this trajectory, and having the curiosity to trying to find out what you want to do, and allowing that for you to go many different routes. Speak about just having that curiosity.
I think curiosity is so important. I think curiosity is something that we lose as we get older. It's something that we eventually have to tap into, and I think you and I were actually having a conversation about this, about imagination the other week.
Yeah.
But I think curiosity is so important because as we enter into adulthood, we hit these moments where we're trying to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to do? Who am I supposed to be? Maybe I decided to take the more traditional route, and I realized that the traditional route didn't lead me to my passion or to my purpose. And so instead of allowing curiosity to really guide us and us listening to our instinct and what we really love, we panic. And I don't think you can find passion and purpose out of panic. I think it only happens out of curiosity. I believe when yielded correctly or wielded correctly, that curiosity is a God-given thing.
Yeah.
I think imagination, when wielded correctly, is a God-given thing. And I feel like those are the places that passion and purpose are often birthed. I think that our spirits know who we're supposed to be more than we do. Maybe our mind does.
Yeah.
And I think it requires a level of releasing what seems logical and tapping into that inner curiosity to be like, okay, this may not be something that makes, because oftentimes the thing that we're called to do isn't something that there's a solid blueprint for, right?
Yeah.
So like you think about like what you're building with Gradient, you're like solving a problem that, or a challenge that you saw, or a gap, you're filling a gap that wasn't filled before, right? And so I think oftentimes the thing that really is the thing that's supposed to guide us, the thing that we're supposed to really tap into is something, it might be an industry, right? But nobody's going to really tap into it the way we're designed to.
Exactly.
And so we freak out kind of using logic, looking for like a path or a blueprint, like what is it supposed to be, or I can't do this. And I think sometimes it's necessary to let that go and tap into that curiosity. So I think about myself now looking at being 10 and 11 years later from that kid who was 10 to 15 years later from that kid that was trying to figure out, what they were going to do. But my childhood was really like, it was ran by that curiosity. Like I had a really strong knack for God and a really strong knack for creativity. And it was like whatever that path like led me to, that's what I discovered. And I think having that path of discovery led me to find the thing that I think honestly is really still just a tool.
Yeah.
It's not even the thing that I considered the thing. Right now, it's not the thing anymore. It ended up being the floor for the next thing. And I think that curiosity is one of the things that help guide that kind of path.
That's incredible. You spoke about, just necessarily not the non-traditional route of things, and, curiosity and imagination, what we talked about like last week, and how, some of us lose that imagination as we get older,
Yeah.
just due to so many different factors. Can we speak a little bit more to the non-traditional route, right?
Yeah.
Because as something that I'm building here with the Gradient is such a non-traditional platform for like so many people, so many Black people specifically, to essentially find their passion, for them to be able to live out their purpose. And it's not the traditional route of like learning or discovering things. Could you speak a little bit more to your path of the non-traditionality? I don't know if that's a word or not, but just like being non-traditional in the way that you approach things.
Absolutely. So I will say the parts of my path that were traditional is that I chose the college route, and it was something that ended up being helpful for me. However, I would say even my approach to the college route was not, I need to make sure I have a I need to make sure I have a job at the end. And I will say, I think part of that comes from privilege. I have entrepreneurial parents. So my parents are full-time entrepreneurs. So when I was like, I want to pursue entrepreneurship, it was just like, oh, we're an entrepreneurial family. That makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think I understand that there's some privilege to that. But what I will say that I think can be applied to many different paths is if you are a creative and you decide that college or university is a part of what will help you get to where you need to go, I would say use it as a tool. And I would say be very intuitive with that. There's so many different options, and you mentioned it. There's so many even different avenues of education, right? We have Skillshare, we have master classes, we have the Gradient, right? We have all of these different things where we can be introduced. We have YouTube University,
Yes.
right? You can learn how to do a lot of stuff for free.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff for free. College was important for me, specifically VCU's design program, because it taught me how to think. I already knew how to design, but it taught me how to solve problems through design. Yeah. I needed that experience and that exposure. However, when I look at some of the things that we were exposed to, they're things that I can also access outside of the traditional space. And I look at a lot of people that I went to school with, and I don't want to discount anybody's path either. But I'll say I look at a lot of the people that I went to school with who had access to this great education, and it all boiled down to whether or not they were going to be able to really meet the traditional standard post-college. And I will say, again, there is a bit of privilege in that, but I think it's important. I think it's important that, like, let's say you're in a space where, yes, it's important that you're able to pay back loans or you have to pay your bills, right? I think not allowing that to be the driving force of your life is important. There's so many people, so many entrepreneurs, and so many creatives who use their jobs to fund their business or their passion.
Yes.
And so I think I would say traditional routes aren't bad if they're used as a tool and not the end all be all in case the traditional route doesn't work for you. So hopefully that part makes sense. Yeah. I think a lot of times we step into the traditional route because we're told 2 + 2 is always going to equal 4. And the truth is that oftentimes it doesn't happen. But if I know that these different spaces or avenues are simply tools for me, then I can figure out, no, how is this supposed to work for me versus me working for it? And I think that then gives us space to lean into curiosity. So my big thing in college, I was like, I'm going to use all of these resources to build a business. And I'm going to do it while I'm in here. And so while I will say privilege had a big part of my experience, a lot of my friends in college who were like doing whatever or like just doing class. Like I had clients, like I had a client list, right? Or I was working on projects or learning how to write contracts or got an internship, like tracked down an internship because at this time, branding, like everybody's a brand expert, but at the time that I started, branding wasn't a huge thing, and so I digged for a mentor and found somebody that would help teach me how to run the back end of a business. And I was like helping to produce events, and I was managing personal brands and all that stuff. And so my thing was whatever I learned, it was going to serve me and I wasn't going to serve it. And so I think whether you come from a privileged background or not, if you're using traditional routes, I think that's a way to look at it. Let it serve you, but don't serve it.
Yeah.
And also recognize that there are other avenues that you can take outside of the traditional space.
Yeah. Part for me was seeing, just coming out of high school, right? Like everyone is just trying to figure out like what they're going to do with their lives next. And, we're all like 17, 18 years old, having to make a huge decision of like what we're going to do,
which is ridiculous,
for the rest of our lives, which is like such a wild concept. And at that time, I just didn't really know like what I wanted to do. And it seemed as if, from my perspective, that like my friends were like, college just like ultimately like made sense for them, and that was like the traditional route. Like it's like, a lot of people at that time had like the American dream concept, right?
Yes.
So it's like you go to college, you potentially meet someone, you get married to that person, you have kids, the white picket fence, and like that's just like what life was.
Right.
And for me, I was like, is that really life? Like I couldn't see my life being that, because I ultimately didn't come from like a traditional like house, right? Like I didn't have my father. I only had like my mother. So I was like, my mother was like a single black parent, like just raising a kid. And, over time that became the norm for like so many other people, but that wasn't like the traditional standard for like people. And so just having that mindset and everything, and how my mother just kind of, nurtured the gifts or my talents that she saw within me, which was like the arts. I just kind of like was always going down that direction. And so to see my friends, going to college and eventually some of them graduating, and, me not having like the diplomas on the walls, or just, everything that comes with like being in college and going out down that traditional route, I kind of like embraced the non-traditional, because like I didn't see anything else. I didn't know anything else. And obviously like, it was a little nerve-wracking in many cases, because like you don't necessarily see too many people going down like that non-traditional route. You see people who go to school, and some of them get jobs, and they have that sense of security. Was it's like, dang, like I guess I should have like went down that route, but for me it wasn't as fulfilling to be able to see that. And obviously like I won't have the walking down the aisle of innocence of like getting my diploma and my parents like yelling my name and all of that, but I've had like so many different other experiences that my parents have been able to like yell my name in a different sense. And being so fulfilled, and being at the intersection of technology, creativity, and impact. That's like that's that lane for me. That's that lane for me. So it's been like extraordinary going down like that non-traditional route. So you spoke to being a PK and doing things within like the Christian world. We work with TLC. We're partners with TLC. Speak about just, bringing your creativity and some of the gifts and, the curiosity that got you into like branding and, just that particular world in itself, and merging that with that world. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So it really honestly started for me with a question. So I've always loved all different aspects of culture, right? So I never have liked to, while my faith has always been strong and central, it's not that I've been so boxed that I did not enjoy other parts of culture, right? And so I think as creatives, it's important to kind of draw inspiration from a lot of different places and things and different things like that. But I remember at 18 years old, wanted to answer this question. I was looking at, I was a huge Beyonce fan, right?
Are you still a huge Beyonce fan?
Huge Beyonce fan. And so I would study, if you go on YouTube, and I think they're still on YouTube, she has videos of like the production behind like all of her shows. So like if she goes on tour, there's like a video series for like the making of such and such. So there's tons of those, right? And I would study like how she built out her shows, how she built out her tours, just how detailed she was and like what she was building and how excellent it was, right? But also being someone who was a part of church culture, like not only am I a PK, I'm a fourth generation pastor on my mother's side, on my father's side, and sixth generation on my mother's side. Did I say that right? Fourth generation on my dad's side, sixth generation on my mom's side.
Okay, yeah.
And so it's very much ingrained in a lot of who I am, right?
Yeah.
And so I was looking at all of these other aspects of culture and just how beautifully people were presenting the thing that like God put inside them, right? And then I would look at the church and I was like, wow, like this stuff looks like crap. Like this is horrible. And I think it kind of blew my mind a bit because I feel like God is an excellent God. God is a beautiful God. I think that he's the source of beautiful things. And there's nothing about God or in God or that comes from God that isn't excellent. And so I was like, man, if the church is out of everything, right? If like the church, we know like the church is supposed to represent God, why is it that everyone else's stuff looks excellent and the church stuff looks like an afterthought, like it's a hot mess?
Could we be a little bit specific? Black churches, or is it like white churches too?
Yeah, black church, absolutely. Yes, black church in particular, yes. And so my little 18-year-old self was just like, I'm gonna change that. And I wanted to offer branding and brand strategy to the church because I believed in, I would look at all of the colleagues that I had that were in ministry or had churches, and I was like, you know, they all have really great mission. They're doing really great work. They're doing really great things. And I think that what they express outwardly needs to represent that. And so it was just like this burning passion that I had to like I'm gonna change that. And so I ended up, it was pretty easy because I had access to my target market. And so I started developing branding for churches and faith-based leaders. And so I developed a business called Subdue 28. And it was based on Genesis 1:28, when God tells man to subdue the earth. And the idea was that everybody's got something to subdue, right? Something that God has called them to subdue, to take hold of, to have dominion over. And I wanted to make sure that there were no barriers by which they could subdue what God gave them to. And so I thought that branding could be a huge part of that. And so I built my business Subdue 28, and I really kind of fell in love with like solving that problem. A lot of it had to do with education. So at first it was design, and then after that I was like, people don't just need design. Design is the icing on the cake. They need brand strategy. And that's when I tapped into brand strategy, and I learned as much as I can. But other things I really feel I really feel like God gave me a gift for strategy. So again, this is 2010, 2011. So there's not like all of this information on like brand strategy and what strategy is and how to build a brand. And so I went instinctively, and I feel like God gave me like, this is what this should be. And so I started to build from there. And I think eventually that led to even us working together and working with TLC and building the brand of the Life Church here in Richmond from its inception. But that was kind of like how that started,
Yeah.
and really shaped a lot of my career over the last 10 years. So it went from building the brands of small churches and these amazing pastors who would be pastoring these old 200 and 300-year-old churches with our wonderful elders who we give respect to, but would be like, I don't understand any of this. And we would be coming up with proposals so that people could really see how having a solid brand could really build their vision and their future for generations. And so it's the thing that really guided my career for the last 10 years. So it went from that to then building the brands of really high profile faith leaders from across the country, and then teaching pastors across the country. And it was a really fun ride, but that's kind of where it started.
I felt like that was pretty remarkable that you saw a problem and you decided to solve it. But you also listened to your intuition and your gut feelings for the journey or the route that you wanted to take in life. Can you speak a little bit more to really listening to that, the feeling, listening to your intuition and listening to your gut and following this path that you went down? Because I know for me, with us not really taking the traditional route, often people take the non-traditional route because they feel something within them that feels as if like it's guiding them to do this specific thing. Can you speak more to that?
Absolutely. So I really accredit my path to listening to my intuition, to feeding curiosity, but also being led by Holy Spirit is really important for me. And I think that a lot of times people maybe limit or categorize like what that means to listen to Holy Spirit. I think that people really box the voice of God into something that only is, I think, reserved for people in traditional religious roles or spaces, or people who are in, like, literally within the four walls of a church. But I believe the voice of God is so important. I think it's so valuable. I think that there is no other being, including myself, that knows my path better than God. And I also believe that every human is spirit, and I believe that in relationship with God, there is also relationship between my spirit and the spirit of God. And so that is the thing that I really have like leaned into. I think it's important, one, to hear and know the voice of God. And I think outside of, like, when I think of my creative expression, I think even now, having been 10 years in an industry and space, and here recently have been transitioning to some newer things, one of the things that's been really important to me is, even through my creative expression, like teaching people to how to hear the voice of God and to be open to having dialogue with God. I think that's invaluable, but it's something that I feel like has been necessary for my path and where I have gone. And I also, I think it's important to, remember that, if you believe that, I believe that God is all knowing, all seeing, and there is no voice outside of him that knows more than him. That's my belief. And so I really have relied on God, like what is it that I'm supposed to do next? Like, if you're the author of my life, if I am a spirit, not really even sent to like fulfill what I think is best, but like what you design me to, then you tell me what that is, right? And I think that has become very important because it's brought a sense of fulfillment. I understand that sometimes God will ask you or put a passion in you or give you an inclination that is outside of the beaten path. And you have to be able to trust the voice of God in order to do that, because if not, you'll find yourself limited. And so that really that's been my driving force. Listening to and being led by the voice of God, and knowing that. So I think this was the other thing that I wanted to say. One, understanding and leaning into and listening to and knowing the voice of God, but then also understanding that he didn't make a mistake when he designed me. So he didn't make a mistake when he designed my inclinations. He didn't make a mistake when he designed the things that I would be interested in, or the way that my brain is wired, or the way that I process things, or the way that I speak, or even the certain experiences that I've had along my path, right? So a lot of times I think it's often rare that we find people that lean into both. There are some people that are like, I trust God, but I think I trust God in quotations, right? But I think he made a mistake with myself, right? There's something in me that's not enough. Or there's people that think they know, but then don't trust the voice of God. I think finding the intersection of the two is so important. I trust the voice of God, but then when he tells me to do this one thing that I'm really passionate about, but doesn't make sense in my family, or doesn't make sense when it comes to like a traditional way of doing things, like I trust that he's put in me what's necessary to be successful, even if other people don't think that it's the way that I should go.
Yeah.
And so finding the intersection of the two is so important. I trust the voice of God, but I also trust how he wired me. I also trust that he didn't make a mistake in that. I also trust that like when I show up in my best and full self, when I show up and I'm like, I am whatever this space is, like I'm gonna show up fully in this space. I'm gonna create fully in this space, or I'm gonna allow myself to express myself in this space, or being imaginative with whatever it is. I trust that the relationship between myself and God is so strong and so pure that like when I show up, he shows up. And my expression is really an extension of him.
Yeah.
And so I always say that I think it's so important for people to really lean into how God wired them, because if I spend my life, like Knox, you're incredible. You built incredible things. If I spend my life though trying to do what you do the way that you do it, because I think that the way that you do it is the most successful, I'm keeping someone from seeing a facet of God.
Yeah.
I believe that we are all the Bible says that we're all made in his image and his likeness, right? But we're not anything alike, right? Which means that God has to be multifaceted.
Yeah.
And if I don't lean into what he's saying to me and how he's wired me, if I don't get to know myself and really lean and have confidence in that, I'm keeping someone from seeing a facet of God that they're supposed to see through my unique expression.
Yeah. Yeah, no. You hit on a lot of things. A couple things I've been thinking about, like for the last couple of weeks, or just the last couple of months. The first thing I want to speak about is, the ways that God may speak to people. And I tell this story, and I've told it to like a couple people. Back in 2017, when I went to Cali and I came back from Cali, before I left for Cali, I had a PT Cruiser at that time, and like a day before I left, the car broke down. The car was breaking down. I was putting like so much money into it, and so I was like, I don't have to worry about it because I'm going to Cali. Like, I didn't know if I was coming back or not. Like, I just thought like, yo, like whatever, right? And so when I came back, I was like, man, like I gotta fix this car. And so like only one thing went bad on it, and I was able to fix it, right? And so I went to the gas station. I was coming out of the gas station, Wawa, and I started to pray. I was praying out loud. I was like, yo, when am I gonna get a new car? Like, because I was so tired of like putting so much money in the whip, and it was just breaking down.
Yeah.
It was just breaking down, and I got out the stoplight, and I was just praying and praying and praying, and I was like, yo, like just send me a sign to let me know when it's time for me like to get a new car. I looked up, and it was like this license plate, and the license plate said, eventually.
That is crazy.
That Jones said eventually.
So
I was like, all right, bet. I ain't gonna pray no more. I'm good. Like you already told me my sign, and it was like that instant. And that was, I want to say June-ish. I got a new car like 2 months later.
Wow.
2 months later, and it's been like a couple of those signs that like God have like talked to me in many different ways, and I believe He talks to me visually most times, but obviously like I've heard Him like audibly at the same time, and through like gut feelings too at the same time. So like yeah, that's one thing I wanted to speak about.
I love that.
And you spoke about also too that like we're not mistakes.
Yeah.
God designed us to be in a way, in a very unique, specific way. And it's kind of like funny that you say that, because for the longest, because I wasn't like planned, like my mother and my father didn't plan me. It was just like, stuff happened, and, I was born essentially. And for the longest, I thought I was a mistake.
Wow.
For the longest. And my mother and my father didn't like call me a mistake, but like,
because you're like, I know I wasn't playing.
Right, like I wasn't playing. Like it wasn't like because my mother and my father, they weren't married, and so they weren't married, and they didn't necessarily have plans to like have kids per se, right? Like they were just like in a relationship, and they were intimate or whatever, and I was just like the equation of that. I was the sum of that equation, and just hearing that, I was like, man, like I'm not really supposed to be here. Like, and for the longest, I was like, yeah, like I'm not supposed to be here. And like over the course of the years, I just came to this conclusion. It was like, well, if I'm not supposed to be here, I might as well just take advantage of this opportunity while I am here. And so I was like, I could either live my life this way, or I could live my life like that way.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm gonna live my life with like super purpose, having like impact on people. And that's kind of like why, like in many ways, I live my life the way I live it, because for the longest I was like, I'm not supposed to be here. For the longest.
Like you tricked the system.
Yeah, basically it's like I was like I was that little sperm that got through, like that wasn't supposed to get through, but I got through. And so yeah, that's why I lived my life in purpose. And but also like you also spoke to the component of also like us being different, like us. I feel like, and I came to this conclusion like 2 weeks ago, I felt like that we are not necessarily supposed to have like goals.
Mm-hmm.
Like what I mean by that, you know how like people say like, oh, like their goals is like my goals. Like I want to be able to like
Yes.
live life exactly
Like this.
like this,
Yeah.
right? Like if they were married on the 10th, oh, I want to get married on the 10th too,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't feel like we're supposed to be like that because I felt as if that was like super limiting and who like God was, and if like, you know, God created like all of this, right? Like I don't think he's gonna limit the lives that like we were supposed to live. Like I don't think that like we were all supposed to have like the same kind of life.
Yes. Yeah.
And so like I just thought I was just thinking about that. I was like, man, like, you know, the life that I want to live. Sure, I understand why people want to have the white picket fence and the American dream, but I saw like my life being like I want my life to be uniquely me. I want to have experiences that like that was intended for me.
Yeah.
I want, you know, people when they see my life, people be like, yo, like, wow, he did that. Like he did that. I didn't know that was a possibility. And not for them to be as if like I want to do the same thing. I want them to be like, so if his life was like this and it was like so like non-traditional, what could my life be?
Right.
And so like that was just like my perspective, and like when you said that, I was like, man, like that just kind of like hit me because these were like the ideas that I had within like the last couple of months.
I love that.
So yeah, so I want to, you know, just close it out a little bit. Where do you see yourself going forward? Whether it is, you know, I'm not going to do the 5 to 10 years, whether it's like the 3 to 7 years, where do you see yourself within like those next years? What do you want for your life in those next couple years?
For me, it's a very interesting question to answer because of life experiences, especially over the last year to the last couple years. I think I've went from being like, absolutely, these are the things, to kind of hitting a space where, and it's not nonchalant, but it's very much hitting a space where I understand that the things that have brought me to where I am now are things that were beyond my doing. So like when you say like I wasn't supposed to be here, right?
Yeah.
It is a matter of like recognizing that the sequence of God's plan trumps the sequence of nature. And so I can say I'm absolutely supposed to do this or be here. A year ago, a little over a year ago, God told me to leave my business. And that was something that I was like, oh, my kid's going to eat off that for generations and generations.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, I want you to leave it. And Rivers is here with us. He was a big conduit of that. And so there are so many things that I think, so I guess to answer your question, I can probably best tell you where I see my life creating impact. I'm okay with not knowing the full how, which is a weird thing to say at 29, but like I'm okay with not knowing the full how because I trust the voice of God. And so I, strangely enough, without being able to articulate the how, I see myself creating legacy for my children. I see myself creating legacy for generations. I was actually telling Barrett the other day, I was like, honestly, if people get to know, and it's so funny because I didn't think our conversation was necessarily going to go to this in particular, but if people if people leave my presence, whether it's through social or whether it's in person or they hear me speaking or whatever it is, and they know that God wants to talk to them, and they learn how to hear the voice of God, then I feel like I've done my job. And so I see myself teaching thousands of people how to hear the voice of God, how to lean into the voice of God, how to have dialogue with God, how to live a spirit-led life. There was something, one of the reasons why God had me leave my business, he was like, you know how to build a healthy brand, but you don't know how to build a healthy person. And so even the idea of what it means to subdue is different for me now. And so I want to still be teaching people how to subdue what God put in their hands, but maybe not from a business building aspect, more so from, yes, we're going to create, but how do I become the person that God designed for me to be in the process? How do I build healthy rhythms in the process? How do I make sure that in the process of me subduing, I'm not neglecting and killing myself? Yeah. I think those are things I had to learn the hard way, and that's where I see my impact. And then always for our people, I believe that God has given everyone something to subdue, and that there are sects of people. Oftentimes, it's people that look like us who are limited because of socioeconomic barriers or because of injustices. And I do not believe that my body is supposed to be in the ground until I make some sort of impact there, making sure that someone's able to subdue and their barrier is not what our ancestors were fighting for us to not have to climb over anymore. So those, and of course that exists in, I see myself with family and all of those things. But I see a long-lasting generational impact, and whatever fruit of that comes with that, whether it be money or living in certain places, whatever, may it be the fruit of the yes that I give to God. But it's not my major focus. My focus is saying yes and just living off the fruit and making sure that other generations can live off the fruit of that as well.
Yeah, that it's that legacy piece.
Yeah.
It's what you leave. It's what you leave behind.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we wouldn't be here without the legacy that other people left for us.
Exactly. And
so it's only right for us to be able to do the same thing for the people who will come after us.
Yes.
And that's kind of like what this is. The gradient, to be able to be able to create a legacy, and to ultimately change the lives of like others, so they can either be in this position or a better position for themselves and their families, and for the people to come. So that was one way to put that. So we're gonna wrap it up.
Okay.
And I just want you to leave a message for those who are listening, for those who you feel as if your words are for. Yes.
If I could leave anyone listening with anything, I would say, I would encourage you to go back to the beginning. Go back to your childlike curiosity. Go back to when you felt like more things are possible than the way they feel right now. And, for the person who is still trying to find their way, know that the voice of God is still there to like guide you to that way. God didn't make you creative by accident. He didn't give you passions that some people think are weird by accident. He did not placed this like desire to solve problems that no one else sees by accident. He did not wire your mind the way that he did by accident. And his plan supersedes the sequence of nature. And really, like, the fact that you're here is a miracle. But the thing that you're afraid to release because it doesn't make sense or it doesn't follow the beaten path, somebody's waiting for it. Somebody's waiting for it. And that voice that tells you no, or maybe it's too late for you to try, or people that come from your background shouldn't try, or you're not the person to do it. Their voice might be loud, but it's not louder than the voice of God. So go back to the beginning, lean into that curiosity, give yourself permission, and allow yourself to be led by a different voice this time. And we look forward to seeing where it takes you.
That was incredible, right? I don't think there's any more to say. I want to say thank you for coming out, giving us your time, your words, your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime. This is Antonio Knox and Lauren White signing out on the Gradient Radio.